if I can
Yeah,
ask a question.
sure. Second.
The first one is about caloric intake. It's always said that it's very important to measure how much you are intaking, but I think that says nothing if I don't know how much I'm burning each day. So in which way can I measure more or less accurately how much I'm burning each day? That's the first question.
Okay.
The second one is about resting. How much resting is good resting? It's always said that skipping a day is a bad thing, but I think in many scenarios that can be actually positive. But I guess that too much rest is actually detrimental for performance and for hypertrophy. So I would like to know how much rest is good or bad, and how to measure the intake of calories.
Got it. So I'm just gonna repeat the questions because we don't have the mic to pass around. Okay. So the first question was how to determine the calorie burn, or do you even have to? And then the second one is basically how do you know when you take time to rest? So I'm gonna give you the answer to the first. Radu is gonna give you the answer to the second. Okay. So the first thing is that number one, measuring calorie expenditure is very, very expensive. It's a very, very difficult process, and most of us, it's completely impractical. All the widely available tools to us as public, just where you can buy Fitbits or things like that, are inaccurate, and they just don't provide usable data, right? So what you can do is something that I mentioned earlier in my talk. When you set up a certain amount of calories that you intake, and you can measure input very easily, right? Input is much easier because it all has to go through your mouth. Right? So everything that you input, you write down, and then you can also measure the change of your body weight, and that tells you whether you need to make adjustments or not, right? So if your change in body weight per week is, let's say, you're dropped half a kilo, that tells you that you're in a deficit. It may not even be a weekly average, might be an average among like 3 weeks, because sometimes there's going to be a little bit of water retention. So you're going to have to wait a little bit to see if you're in a deficit or not. So instead of worrying about the burning side of things, measure the intake and measure the change, which is going to tell you automatically if you're in the right place. Because the burning is almost impossible to measure for us. We have to use like doubly labeled water and stuff like that researchers are using, and they actually have these weird pants that they put in like people, and it's like it's uncomfortable. You don't want to do that, man. Cool.
Can I say one more thing about that? I think that most of the calculators that we have online or formulas, they do an average of what you burn, and I'm not sure what calculator you use for your to calculate your caloric expenditure, but most of them have that activity level that you have to choose. Sedentary, lightly active, active, very active. You're familiar with that, right? If you choose, for example, active, let's say you work out 6 times a week and maybe you do walking every day for 1 hour and a half. Let's say that would be considered active. That caloric expenditure is an estimation of what you would burn on average in a week. And people often ask, I think this is related to your question, often ask if you do cardio, do you have to eat back the calories you burned in that cardio? Well, if cardio was one of the factors that made you choose your activity level, then you don't, because the formula already accounts for the calories that you burn during cardio. But if on the weekend you go hiking and you walk 10 kilometers on a mountain with a 20 kilograms backpack, you're going to burn more calories that day, and those calories you can eat back because they are not taken into account by the formula, because it doesn't happen all the time. So this is the way I approach setting up the caloric expenditure. You use a calculator to get an estimation, and if you go out of your way 1 day a week and you burn a lot more calories, then you can eat more to compensate for that.
Yeah, and be careful with the compensation part of things, because sometimes the calorie that you're doing, like the calorie that we all think we're expanded, sometimes our bodies will naturally adjust in our subconscious activity to reduce fidgeting, moving around, and our posture control and all of these things, and you're just gonna kind of compensate for it anyway, right? So keep that in mind, like with the adjustments, you're like, well, one hike in the backpack, like 4,000 calories, let's go to McDonald's, Keep that in check, maybe you want to introduce a little bit more, but it's not a rate of McDonald's day.
Yeah.
And the second question was about...
Can you repeat the second question, please?
About resting. How
was
much
about recovery
resting
and rest.
is good and bad resting?
Yeah, I think that depends a lot on your level of training, because our tolerance to training, especially to training volume, increases over time. Advanced lifters can tolerate a much higher training load than beginners. So I think rest is very subjective, not only because of the training experience, but also because of genetics. As Mario said, some people have to deload maybe once every 3 weeks. Other people can go maybe 7 weeks without deloading because they feel great. I think that you can only learn the answer to this question in your situation by testing, by seeing how you actually respond to things. Maybe I would say follow, like Mario said, follow a certain program and see if that works well for you. If you feel great, then just follow that. If you feel like if you feel tired all the time, then it means that you're probably doing too more and need to take more rest. But it can also happen the other way, where you actually feel pretty good and you don't actually feel tired. When it comes down to deload, you actually don't feel like deloading. In that case, maybe you actually can tolerate a higher training load, and you can actually do more to progress faster. This is
Yeah. I mean, 100% on point. You got to measure and be really on point with your metrics to know this. Like all of you guys here, we all have a specific amount of tolerance towards stress. So you got to measure those things. And those things, when you're talking about stress and recovery, they don't just take into account your training. There's some pretty good data that, let's say, students during periods of exams, they are worse off with strength training. They get weaker because the stressor from the life now is affecting their training performance. Or things like you miss a couple of nights of sleep. Things like that. Like you get in a fight with someone that you care about. And things like all of this can affect how you perform in the gym. So it's a very, very complicated equation that it's best to just see how you respond. Like, for example, for my clients, what I do is I actually track their energy level, their focus level, and their sleep. And when I do that, I can kind of correlate, okay, they missed a day of sleep. The next day, focus went down, mental performance, the energy overall went down, and the weight kind of stayed the same because now there's some water retention due to increased cortisol, right? So when you have all these metrics, it's very easy to see the patterns. But have the metrics, guys, right? As we said in the beginning, if you don't have the metrics, what we're talking about here doesn't work. Like none of it works without the metrics. So the metrics are key. So yeah, that's kind of it. So more questions? Okay, boom.
Yes, two questions. The first one is, I heard from another YouTuber, Ahlströ, I don't know if you heard it, that he was talking about positive neurogenic balance, and he said that you could actually gain muscle weight while losing fat, just by basically checking your protein intake.
Okay.
Do you think that he is saying something correct?
Okay, so the question is like, can you gain muscle while losing fat, right?
Yes.
Very, very simple. Like the holy grail of fitness, quote unquote. Absolutely, it can happen in certain scenarios. I see it happen with a lot of, like about 75% of my clients. And the reason why is because the people that approach me for coaching are already a little bit overweight. They have a lot of potential to build muscle, and when we put them in a calorie deficit, because they're so far from their genetic potential, they can still build a ton of muscle while they're losing fat, right? And of course, the protein, what he mentioned, there's a certain level of protein, as I said in my talk, is about 2 grams per kilo of your lean body mass that you want to sort of maintain anyway. And over the course of years, maybe in like your entire lifetime, you're going to build like 15 kilos of muscle, so that's going to go up by 30 grams or so, but it's not going to be some crazy amount of protein, right? So if you think about it, for your entire lifetime, if you go from 60 kilos of lean body mass to like 80 kilos of lean body mass, which is almost impossible, like think about that. That's not a lot of muscle. That's an extra maybe 40 grams of protein. So it's not a lot per day. That's one meal, And the scenario where this can happen is if the individual is not already like super jacked or close to their genetic potential. Like I can't build a ton of muscle and get a lot stronger on a deficit. I just can't, because I don't have that much room left. But a beginner, someone starting out, man, I mean, the deficit won't even affect them that much because they're just going to gain a lot of muscle and strength while still losing fat because they're so far off, right? Or another example is someone who's been training in the past. They took a couple of years off, and they have the muscle memory effect there. And now all of a sudden they started training and started being in a deficit and started tracking everything, hitting the protein, everything is on point. All of a sudden they start regaining that muscle mass before and also losing fat because they're in a deficit, right? So it's not really like super strict, but there are certain scenarios where it's more likely, or where it's even, I mean, the question is kind of weird because, look, when your goal is losing fat, that's the priority. Sort of like, you're not going to prioritize gaining muscle while you're losing fat. You know, it doesn't make sense. So gaining muscle is sort of like a side effect that's going to happen by you having a great training program and having great nutrition while still losing fat. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's kind of like a side thing that happens. You know, it's kind of your side hustle while you're still like getting shredded.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
I think it's really important, to answer this question, it's really important to say what happens to the body weight. I think most people, most beginners and intermediates can gain muscle while their body weight is decreasing, meaning they lose more fat than muscle. It's very, 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 very unlikely to lose fat while your body weight is increasing. So basically to gain muscle, enough muscle to actually gain body weight but lose body fat at the same time. That doesn't happen. And I think that for everyone, including Mario and everyone that is actually advanced, if they eat at maintenance for long periods of time, maybe 2-3 years, they will be able to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. But their body weight stays the same. I think this question is really confusing for people because they do not. Most people, when talking about the subject, don't mention what happens to the body weight. Mm-hmm. If the body weight goes down, it's very likely that you can gain muscle. If your body weight stays the same, again, it's very likely that you can gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. But if your body weight is increasing, no. Even beginners, I don't think that beginners can maybe. I honestly have not heard, or at least have not talked with guys that could increase their body weight and lose fat at the same time.
It does happen, but the point that we're all like, it's important to understand, like everything that we're talking about here, you gotta understand the magnitude of change. Like if you gain 100 grams of muscle while losing 15 kilos of fat, you're gaining muscle while losing fat, but what's the magnitude of that happening? Right? So what YouTubers often, and I'm not putting anybody on the spot here, is like I try really my best, and Radu tries his best. We try to put the context, to put out all the fucking information that you need. But sometimes it's not like, we can't mention every single little scenario in detail, so we kind of, sometimes it's easy to misinterpret it because there's so much context. So it's important to context this, what's the magnitude? You know, like if we're saying, hey, you can get shredded and build like 10 kilos of muscle in a month, that's not going to happen. You know, like I'm not going to build 10 kilos of muscle and lose 10 kilos of fat. Like, it's just not going to happen, right? As a natural lifter, there's no freaking way, right? So it's important to know the magnitude, and also it's important to know what the potential really is to build muscle. I mean, there's multiple different models out there, and one I think Lyle McDonald's puts out there, he says like you gain about 20-25 pounds, which is 10 to 12 and a half kilos of muscle in the first year of your training. Think about that. Like that's if you do absolutely everything right, and that's not in a calorie deficit. That's considering the situation where everything is proper and your focus is on gaining muscle. That's sort of like the average best case scenario. Of course, there's like guys, you know, like there's like these genetic freaks, you know, like you just walk into the gym, do like a couple of sets, and it's like bam. I know these guys. You know, there's guys like never stepping into a gym. Like I have a buddy who's like a construction worker. He's like shredded, man. Like he's like 7% body fat, like stage lean, and he's like carrying bricks all day. His like traps are huge. If that guy would just do like 4 months of proper training, he would be like the best natural bodybuilder. Like he would like be the top 10. There's guys like that, you know, and he doesn't need to do much. There's guys like they get a huge chest after a couple of push-ups at home, you know, like 100 push-up challenge. But normally for averages, that doesn't really happen. I don't have really great genetics or anything. I mean, as I said, I trained more than 7 years. I haven't missed 5 workouts, right? And I'm doing everything right. And you still don't see that much. And that's what it really is. You know, sometimes it is like that, right? So accept it, you know, like work what you got, man. That's what it is. More questions, unless you, let's just do more. Boom.
You had one.
Oh, you had a second one. Okay, yeah, you got a second one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
About the progressive strength algorithm, progressive strength training.
Yeah.
I didn't understand one thing. For example, if I'm doing a squat, 3 sets of 8 repetitions, and I want to increase, should I do like, if we say the first algorithm, on the second week, 3 sets of 7 repetitions with an increased weight? It's like this? Or
Yeah, intensity goes up. Intensity means weight, by the way, for everybody. You know, like people sometimes confuse intensity by how they feel exhausted in the gym. You know, like it's sort of like, oh yeah, man, I don't feel like, I get this from some of my people on YouTube, like, man, I'm doing your program, but I don't really feel like this doing much, you know? It's like, I just cut the rest period to 20 seconds because otherwise I don't feel like I'm doing anything. You know, like those kinds of comments, right? And the example I like to use is that, okay, you want to feel exhausted, go run a marathon. Do you think that marathon is going to build any muscle? It's going to get you a hell of a lot of soreness. It's going to like get you fucking wiped out. Are you going to build any muscle? No. Right? So keep that in mind that sometimes it might not feel like there's a lot, but the numbers are going up and the change will reflect over time. The numbers are going up, man. You're stacking the odds to build muscle, right? You're stacking the odds. And those 2.5 kilo difference doesn't feel like much. But over time, if you think about that model that I just gave you, every 5th week you have a bump on your baseline strength increase. How many weeks do you have in a year? 52, right? That's 10 chances to add 2.5 kilos to a lift. 10 times 2.5, that's 25 kg. I mean, that's nothing to like discard, right? You add 25 kilos on your bench in a year, that's hardcore, you know? If you go from like 100 to 125, that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
Keep that in mind, you know? So yeah, I hope that helps. Yeah, I'll have you get
yeah. You had a question there?
Are we gonna jump around like in RSD seminars where we just get up and we energetics or?
Well, if you want to hug some guys and kiss them, like you're in the right place, bro.
Yeah, back there.
Hello guys, I'm Farouk. Both of you guys very inspirational to me. I started my own fitness channel because of you guys, and I wanted to know you guys like your plans, your current plans, like both fitness way and in your business, like because you guys are inspiration, and then hopefully one day we'll be like you.
Thanks, bro. Thanks. I'm humbled.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So you're asking about my plans for the future? Yeah.
Now and future is possible, like business-wise, fitness-wise.
This question comes at an interesting time for me because I was telling you about the fact that I chose to do this because I needed a goal in my life, and I feel like I have achieved that goal, and I think that over the next months and years I will slowly branch out and do other things, because while fitness is something that I like, it is not something that I truly feel passionate about. I like it. I like teaching it. I understand it. I think I like it because I understand it. But I feel like in the future I'll probably be doing something else. This is my prediction. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's a kind of interesting question as well. And in things that, for me, health and fitness is super, super important in my life as well. And what he mentioned, what Radu mentioned in one of his talks, is really that it's more about the behavior change aspect of it that is the critical factor. And for example, this is one of the rare events that where I actually went into technical side of things. You know, you guys know why? Is I start each event and I just ask people, well, what's your biggest sticking point? And almost 99% of times, it's always about consistency. Like, I just can't stick with it, man. You know, like, it's always about behavior change. And you guys know that follow my channel, I talk a lot about psychology, a lot about personal development, because it has to be there. It has to be there. Otherwise, you will not succeed. So in the future, for these talks and for these seminars, I mean, I'm just going to 10x everything that I'm doing right now. You know, that's like, right now, it's like, it's sort of at a level where it's good, but it's just going to 10x. Right? Everything is 10x, right? So in terms of the psychology side of things, it's going to be 10x more of that, 10x more of fitness. I already know pretty much what every guy needs to get in an amazing shape, But now, challenge for me is to be able to bring that to millions and millions of people. And they're already like million. I think you have like how many? Like you have like 20 million views, 30 million, 40 million views in your channel. Like this, I don't even know anymore. Like I have like 9 million views or so, like 10 million, right? But I feel like the content, even though people are watching it, I want to present it in a way that it actually infuses this change of behavior where they can actually get that identity shift and become that person through either affirmations, goal cards, or whatever it is. That's sort of my big focus now. I'm really researching. When people talk about fitness to me, I spend about 40% of my time researching fitness articles, studies, and all that stuff. But then there's 60% of the time where I read psychology books, like old textbooks from the 60s, like nobody even knows exist. You know, like nobody knows that guy except him and his family. You know, like I'm like reading his stuff. You know, it's like you find it somehow, and that's what's very fascinating to me, like how the human mind works. So I'm gonna go deeper and deeper into it, and yeah, man, crack the formula, right? Let's get a question here.
So I have scoliosis, and my doctor said that I shouldn't go to the gym.
Mhm.
Now I know two guys, one from YouTube and one from my local gym, that also had scoliosis, but now overcame it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I want to know your thoughts on this. If you have any ideas that you could share.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to give you a fair answer, and that's the fact that I'm 100% unqualified to even talk about it. Like, I know my boundaries as a personal trainer, certified coach, nutritionist, everything, but this is outside of my boundaries. And the reason why I have to say that is because everybody needs to understand their scope of practice. When I have a person that reaches out for me for coaching or for advice or anything, like I always refer out if it's something that I'm not qualified with. Like stuff like binge eating disorders. There's a ton of people. You guys would be shocked if you read some of the emails that I've gotten related to binge eating. People are like, oh my God, man, I want to kill myself and shit. Like, I'm like, dude, like here's the person. Go talk to them, right? Because I can't help you, right? Even though I potentially could give them some bit of information, but it's not something that I'm really comfortable with because I don't know that that is correct. I can tell you exactly how many calories you need to eat, macros, how to fucking crush it in the gym, but I can't tell you how to do like lordosis, scoliosis, how to fix your rotary cuffs and things like that. I refer out. I always refer out when it comes to these kinds of conditions. And the only advice I can give you, what I would do in your situation, is search multiple different opinions. And one thing that is going to make every doctor hate you is if you ask them about if they ever made a mistake. They hate that. And I asked every doctor, dentist, or any person that I work with, what's their error rate. They hate that, right? Because I can't trust a doctor that's never made a mistake.
Huh.
And I can't trust a doctor that's never made a mistake and that they don't want to admit it. Because they know that they did make one, and I know that they made one. Everybody knows, we're all human. Like, I've been on this planet long enough to know how irrational we are. And because my thinking is very black box, right? I think people can improve fantastic and they can make great things happen in their life, but they have to make mistakes along the way. So if they aren't willing to admit those mistakes, remember the integrity part, I don't trust them. So keep that in mind, right? Radu,
It's the same, exactly the same answer. Really, when I get emails like that, I just say, hey, find a good doctor, because we truly are not qualified to talk about health issues related with anything. I get emails from guys asking me about diabetes or other health questions, and I never give opinions on that because it's really not safe.
Yeah, we want to be very considerate as well, you know, like we want to understand our boundaries and
I understand.
yeah. Boom.
Okay, so first of all, I want to say I the talk was really interesting, but it doesn't really fit on my needs. So I wanted to actually stretch so it kind of includes my needs. For the moment, I'm actually training calisthenics. I hate weight training. I think it's very time consuming, and I actually enjoy my body right now. So I want to keep doing crazy stuff on the bar without adding a lot of muscle myself. So would you think that measuring your macros is actually that important as long as you're eating healthy, you're eating properly, your sleep is properly, everything is in place. Other than you're not very strict on the measure part.
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. I mean, I'm a pro movement kind of guy. I don't think weight training is for everybody. Calisthenics is fantastic, right? If you can get strong, you feel great about yourself, if you feel like that's your thing, go all at it, dude, right? I love it.
They don't expect you to do
I love it, right?
crazy shit on the bar.
Like whatever you can do on the bar, I'm impressed, right? It's like awesome, right? As long as you're out of your couch or out of your chair, I'm like, yes, right? One more person that is active. That's my ultimate philosophy. I'm not married to any one of these approaches. Like I could tomorrow just like drop everything, bam, like this is the approach, right? So keep that in mind. Now, when you talk about macros and calories, if you're happy with the way you look right now, if you're really, really happy, you don't want to make any changes, like radical, drastic, don't track it, right? Like be relaxed about it, right? Be sort of like, it's like me playing tennis. When I play tennis for fun. Like I know I'm never gonna get better. I'm not trying to get better. I'm not playing it to win. I'm not playing it to be a pro at it. I'm not obsessed with it, right? When I'm in the gym, I'm approaching it like a pro. So I'm gonna execute every single bit of the program, systematize algorithms, everything. So I'm like amateur versus like fun versus pro mode. So if you're training, if you exercise, your fitness side of your life is sort of in this like enjoyment, fun, amateur, get some of the results, enjoy my life and make it sustainable, all good, man. If you want the best results, it's probably a good idea to track, maybe not for an entire lifetime. When I say tracking, people think like, oh my God, like I have to buy my FitnessPal lifetime membership, it's like forever. Even 2 weeks of tracking can give you a good idea where you're at. And then drop it, man. Just make adjustments based on habits. I have a lot of my clients actually doing a habitual diet approach. They're not even tracking at all, but they did tracking. And why I have them do tracking is because it's going to teach them exactly what they're eating. They know exactly what the macros are. Once you know the system, it's easy to like take a step back, take your foot off the pedal, it's easy. But if you don't know the portion sizes, if you don't know what the hell you're eating or how much protein you're getting in or any rough idea of your calorie intake, man, it's like just 2-3 weeks is going to be a revolution for you. Most people don't know a difference between a handful of nuts and like double the amount of calories from nuts. Like they're like, it's the same, but it can be like a difference between 150 and 300 calories in just one little swipe through like the candy bar or whatever, right? Very, very easy. But once you measure it, you know. And once you know, it's your responsibility whether you want to do it or whatever you want to do with it, right? Right? So it's sort of like not a black and white kind of thinking that we really want to promote. Nothing we say here is the holy grail. These are not the 10 commandments. These are things that fall in a whole spectrum of, okay, I want to try this, apply, do a little bit of it, then adjust in the future, take it easy. Take it with a little bit of like, okay, contextualize it.
Yeah. But I'm going to say something else. I think that calisthenics promotes leanness. If you train calisthenics, you will naturally eat in a way that you don't get fat. Because if you get fat, you lose your performance because you have more body weight. And what I've noticed is that people that do calisthenics don't need to track macros usually to stay lean, because they naturally want to make progress, and I don't know, something mental, physical, something happens where they actually eat just enough to stay at their body fat percentage, or actually get very lean because they want to improve their relative strength, to be able to the leaner you are, the better you are at body weight exercises. That's a rule. However, you may not get proper nutrition when you're trying to build muscle. This is if on calisthenics, like anything else, you need protein, and you need enough calories to actually gain muscle. If you want to get a little bit bigger, you need to be in a calorie surplus. And if you go by what you feel like eating, you may actually eat at maintenance. And so if you want to gain more muscle, I think it would be a good idea to track your food intake. So it's almost the reverse, because on weight training, people usually have a difficulty with losing fat, because when you're working with weights, the fatter you are, usually the stronger you are. Because if you have a lot of body mass, you have more leverage and it's easier to move the weights. But for calisthenics, is the other way around. So it's easy to stay lean and it's probably harder to gain weight. So I would say that if you want to build muscle, track. If not, then it like you feel.
Yeah, that's a good one,
Yeah.
man. Okay, cool. Let's take one from the back.
Summer is coming, so all of us want to get stressed. And let's say, for example, I have a good muscle mass on my side, and in a day I have to eat about 200 calories and 200 calories to 200.
Louder, I can't hear you. Louder.
Sorry, I'm really.
It's good, man.
Just a second. So, let's say for example, in one day I just eat 100 protein and I hit my calories number already. What should I do? Like go further for protein or just stop?
Got it. Good question. So his question is, if you miss your protein goal for a day, should you sort of like eat more protein even though it's going to put you off calories a little bit and just call it a day? You know, I had a little bit more protein, you know, I had to get my protein. Well, it's sort of like a priority situation. I do recommend doing that for almost everybody and my clients, because even if you do have a deficit of a calorie in a weekly basis, one day is not going to make much of a difference, because it's a 3,500 calorie deficit or a 3,000 calorie deficit or 4,000 calorie deficit. That extra 400 calories is not going to make any difference, right? So if you do get extra, let's say 40 grams of protein, that's nothing. That's almost like 100 to 200 calories, right? So be liberal with adding more. You know, just don't go like super off board, but be liberal with adding more. And always think of it as sort of like trends, where you're going, in which direction you're going with your calories. There's always a buffer. And this brings up a very interesting kind of question, and brings a very interesting kind of thing that I see happen a lot. And who here has kind of like started eating like a bag of chips, and then just like the bag just disappears, and there's the second bag, and there's like this whole like it's like it's can't stop eating damn jam chips, right? And it's very similar. If you're maintaining a deficit of 3,500 calories and you eat, I don't know, like a third of a bag of chips, you know, it's like nothing. You know, okay, I blew like 400 calories of my deficit that week. That's still nothing. But in our minds, you know, it's like, oh my God, diet is done. You know, like diet is over. Might as well get the cake, you know. Might as well like raid the fridge. Might as well go to my local bakery and get all these great things you guys have here in Romania. Like that like circle thing with chocolate inside. Damn, man. So yeah, I would say like be more conscious of the weekly intake when it comes to that. It's gonna help you kind of figure those things out.
Yeah, the only thing I was gonna add to that is I think it's a matter of context. If let's say your protein target was 150 grams of protein and you got 110, if you hit your calorie goal and you feel full and you don't feel like eating, I think that you can just stop it there and not eat more protein for that day, and maybe compensate the next day. Eat a bit more protein the following day. However, if you, let's say you had a cheat day and you hit your calories, but your protein was at 70 grams, then I think actually, yeah, if you had a cheat day where you hit your calories, you didn't go over your calories, but you didn't get enough protein, I think it would be a good idea to bump that protein intake to your goal, because it's you're so far away from the daily target.
Yeah.
One more is for Radu.
Yeah.
I follow Body's program as well, and I know you're fast.
Yeah.
So basically, if I want to start a YouTube channel in the future, what would be the approach? Like, I know you made an affiliate with him, and the thing I want to promote is more like his program, like his approach.
Yeah.
So what have you done, and what shall I do in the future? Because I don't want to copy him.
Of course. As an affiliate, especially someone that's starting a fitness channel with the goal of selling courses, do not take any credit for yourself, because you don't have any. In the beginning. Tell your story, and your story will get people to follow you. Because if you present yourself as an expert when you don't have the physique, you don't have the experience, you don't have the charisma, people will attack you. But nobody will attack a person that is sharing their story with the goal of helping others. And what I did in the beginning was I made informational videos, but I always named my sources. So I always pushed the credit to them. Hey, I read that great book, and what I learned was this, and that. You don't have to listen to me. Listen to that guy. And yeah, I'm promoting that book, and it's fine because you're basically the person that lets people know about that book and what you learned from it, your perspective, and people will appreciate that. So do not copy, add upon the information with your own story and experience. And after a while, after, I don't know, 1-2 years, when you've built the experience, you've built the physique, you've built the following, you've built the trust because you had integrity, then people will listen to you when you create your own courses or you have your own original ideas. But you need to build the reputation first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. And everybody, whoever makes videos here, for all of you guys, the worst thing you can do is steal or not cite your source or your content. It just makes you look very douchey and you're just not going to be in this game for long term. I see guys burning out in fitness. I had a couple of people that would take my entire channel. What they would do is they would copy everything in French. They would copy everything in like Dutch or something like that. And it's so obvious because if you have a large following, someone like I had a couple of guys tell them, look, this dude is just copying everything you do. And he can get in a lot of trouble for like intellectual property for doing that. But the funny thing is that if you look at every single video I make, I always cite my research studies, I cite my books, I cite everything. So I'm not taking any credit for it, although the way I present the idea is maybe unique, but I've also learned it from somewhere else. There's some of it from experience, obviously. I mean, we work with a lot of people, but a lot of good data out there, a lot of great videos out there, they have to be cited and they have to come from someone who is like an expert in a very specialized field. Like there's guys that are just studying like the calorie from protein, you know, like there's this guy that is just like spend 45 years of his life studying how 4 calories out of 1 gram of protein and what happens in your body.
And these are the guys nobody knows.
Yeah, like nobody knows these guys, right? And what we do is we take their research and we bring it to the public. So they love you for doing that. Because they can't focus on the marketing, they can't focus on the camera work, they can't focus on all these things. It's almost like they need someone to go ahead and show the world what they've done. Right? But in a good way, in a contextual way, where you take multiple different approaches, where you present it in proper information. So a lot of studies on exercise science, you guys here, you will, if you look up a guy named Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, he's one of the world's leading experts in hypertrophy. And anytime I make a hypertrophy video, I gotta cite him because that's where I learned from it. You know, I'm not gonna research, I'm not gonna like poke my muscle and it's like, see, okay, there's this change. You know, he has like 30 guys in his lab and they're like measuring everything. And I'm going to be like, oh yeah, that's awesome. And I'm going to tell you, okay, here's some of the reps and sets that I've learned from this. This is the amounts. And that's where the data comes from, right? So keep that in mind. So don't like it's very, very easy to fall in the trap of, oh, I'm the guru, you know, I know everything. And everybody will fall in that trap. Like, I'm the guru, you know, like my approach is the best. There's no best approach. Mm-hmm. There's absolutely no best approach out there. And even the science, as we mentioned before, gives you an average. Like average, guys, that means that it's not going to work for everybody in this room. It's going to work for half of you, and for half of that half, it's going to work really well, and for half of that half, it's going to be awesome. Like, think about that. More questions. Boom.
Hey, welcome to Bucharest. It's got gyms and supermarkets, so you won't be bad at home. I have a specific question about abs. So you mentioned, you know, that you also post on Instagram pictures where, you know, you prepare for those photo shoots.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd actually like to set a benchmark. Would you mind showing us your current status by just lifting your shirt?
You know, I have one rule is not to take off my shirt at the event. Like that's the only rule I have. Like if you ask me to do like,
Think about, you know, how lean you can get on a regular basis.
if you like told me to do a push-up or something, I would do it, but take my app.
For the ladies in the audience.
Yeah. They already know how I look naked. Like, yeah, just check my Instagram.
But didn't he talk about the perfect lighting and it's bad marketing?
Yeah, it's bad marketing. And the reason why and the reason why I mentioned that topic earlier is because look, at the end of the day, it's about you having control over the way you look. And if you decide to get more shredded, you can. If you decide not to, it's also your choice. If I decide not to shave my chest hair, it's my choice. Right? If I decide to get a little bit bulkier, I can. If I decide to get a little bit leaner, I can. Ultimately, we all want to have choice of what we're doing. And that's what we're giving the information or the knowledge of the self-image, of the identity, of everything. It's ultimately your choice. And once you have the power to do the change, once you have the power to do this by yourself, you decide how lean you want to get, man. Like, I've been 6% body fat and I felt like shit, so I went to 10 and I feel great and I'm not as lean, but I'm still awesome in the way I perceive myself. Then again, I went a little bit higher and I feel like shit again because now I don't feel lean enough to my point where I want to be, so I got to lean down a little bit more. So it's always like this sort of like a moving target across life where you pick where you want to be in this range and then you stay there or deviate a little bit between, let's say, 10 and 15% body fat. Like if I want to get caveman mode, which I am right now, caveman mode, I'm like 14, 15% body fat. You know, there's still a little bit of abs here, but I don't care about that so much. I want to get my performance up in the gym. Maybe next year I'm going to lean down. You know, it's not that important to be a slave to someone, to any kind of standard, as much as it is that you pick your own standard and stick by that. Because the society was just going to tell you, it's like, oh, I got to be shredded all year round. Guess what? If you're shredded all year round, you're not going to make any gains. Like,
would you say that's realistic?
Trust me on that.
Would you say that's achievable or something we shouldn't follow?
No, if someone tells you, look, you're going to be shredded all year round and you can do that and you get big and achieve your performance goals, it's probably not going to work for most people. Like, there's a percentage of guys that will be able to get shredded and sort of eat maintenance calories and build a little bit of muscle, but it's a very long-term process. If it's your first cut, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna be shredded all year round, look, dude, like you carry like no muscle whatsoever. You know, like there's no guys shredded all year round that are benching 60 kg. You know, like if you have a certain standard in the gym, if you have enough strength built up, if you have enough lean muscle mass, and if you're okay by maintaining that, all good, man. You'll be able to make some gains over time, reduce the body fat over time, make some gradual changes. But if you're in a situation where you're like skinny fat or like overweight and you're like shredded all year round, that's not gonna happen the first time when you do the cut. It's gonna take you a little bit of rinse and repeat, because even your skill set by managing your nutrition and your training is not there yet. You probably don't know as much as you need to know to do that. So there's all these things stacked against you. So it's important to kind of have a longer term vision. Guess what? The time's going to pass anyway, man. Like, you can be shredded all year round in 4 or 5 years from now. I could do it right now if I wanted to, right? But when I look back, my first year of training 7 years ago, and I was super fat and skinny fat and weak, and I benched like the empty bar for like 6 reps. Like, there's no shredded all year round for me, man. Like, I needed to get my bench to 100 kg. I need to get my squat to 130, 140, my deadlift to 250, at least 280 or so. Then I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, I can be shredded, right? So have that idea where it's actually possible and sustainable.
The thing is, what I would add to that is, are you familiar with the idea of set points and settling points? So researchers have found that each person has a biological set point, which is controlled genetically, and that set point is basically where his body fat settles if he just lives life normally in an environment where he does not have an abundance of food. So this is different for every person. For some people it may be 15% body fat. For some people it may be 7%. There are actually some guys, maybe your construction worker friend that maintains 7% body fat. That may very well be his biological set point. That's what his body naturally wants to maintain. In research, it's been shown that some people, if you overfeed them, if you try to make them fat, their body fights that so hard that they can actually eat 1,000 calories above maintenance and not get fat. They just burn the excess off through fidgeting. Some other guys, they store almost all of it. They store 800 calories out of that 1000 calories. So it depends a lot. However, that set point does not determine what you can maintain. It just determines how easy it is for you to maintain that. Because let's say I think my set point is around 14 to 15% body fat. This is what if I just don't focus on nutrition at all, this is what I maintain. However, by having a system of eating and training, you can create an environment that puts your settling point lower than your set point. Your settling point means where your body fat settles because of environmental factors, based on your lifestyle, your access to food, and your activity level. It's been shown that if you take an African, that it's actually not, yeah. If you take an African that has a very low body fat naturally, right, because they don't have food, and you put them in America where food is cheap and abundant, even if his genetic set point is 8% body fat, he's gonna get overweight because the abundance of food overrides what his biology makes his body do. And each of us can choose what our settling point, what settling point we want. For example, I maintained, I think, 8 to 9% body fat for about a year. But I always had to be conscious about my nutrition because my body was fighting, wanted me to eat more. And how do you do that? You see what works for you. For me, it was intermittent fasting, skipping breakfast, eating only in the second part of the day. By making that environmental change and eating low calorie foods, I could get I could get satisfied and not be hungry while maintaining a lower body fat than my body would naturally maintain. However, so you can, if your set point, if you see that you naturally hang around at 15% body fat, know that you can stay at 8%, but you're going to have a nutrition system in place that makes it easy for you to do that. And you will constantly have to fight a subtle urge to eat more because your biological set point is higher than your settling point. Other guys don't have that. Other guys that are naturally lean don't have that. But as Mario said, I think that unless you are really happy with your level of muscle development, it's not a good idea to try to stay lean year round because you're not making gains. This is my biggest fitness mistake that I did. I tried, once I got lean the first time, I was 67 kilograms and I'm 183. I'm 6 feet tall, so 183. And I made almost no gains in 1 year of training because I tried to maintain that. As soon as I started eating more, the weights went up. My performance went up. But I think that when I will be at a level where I'm happy with my muscle development, I will create a nutrition system and training system for me that makes it, that puts my settling point at around 10% body fat. So that is my normal body fat percentage, even if naturally that wouldn't be. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And what he said here, it's called perma-cutting. Like when you're stuck in perma-cutting, like you gain gain a little bit of fat because you start eating more and like, oh my God, I got fat, cut again.